Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie, and I am your event host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I have the pleasure of introducing our two lovely guests. We have Elizabeth Castellano, which seems like we have a lot of family in the audience, maybe some friends, so I'm sure you know who she is, along with Kristen Mankey. We are here to celebrate the release of Save What's Left, her debut novel, where she drew from personal experience growing up in a beach town. So I, for one, am very excited to hear what's behind the curtain, what really happens if you live in one of those little towns that we all love to visit in the summer. Congratulations not only on your debut novel, but if you all haven't heard, this also was just announced as Good Morning America's book club pick. So that is amazing. Sounds like this is going to be the book of the summer, so I'm very excited to hear you talk more about it. Joining her tonight is Kristen Mankey, one of our lovely event hosts and an expert moderator here at RJ Julia. So without further ado, I am going to let them take it away. But just so you all know, we will have a signing line after the event, as well as time for some Q&A. So if you haven't had a chance to get your book, we have some available at the registers. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
For having me.
So we have a couple orders that we can do this in. Do you want to do a reading first? Would you like, I have some very gentle questions for you.
Reading. Maybe we should do reading first and then we'll go. Okay, so I'm gonna go from the beginning because otherwise I have to set up the whole thing. So begins with our protagonist, Kathleen. And she lives in Kansas City. She's lived there for 30 years. And her husband, they go out to breakfast and he one day just says, I would like to go on a world cruise, and he just wants a separation. And so she's now newly single, newly separated, going to a new place. She's going to move to a beach town. So this is what she has to say about Kansas City, where she's lived for a while. I've been ready to leave Kansas City for 30 years. Something happens when you live in Kansas City for a while, and that is you forget the fact that you are, as I was, actually living in Kansas. You think to yourself, well, this is a pretty cosmopolitan place, and we have a newspaper and a football team and a Fortune 500 company and fairly impressive hospital system and museums and a ballet company, and you forget the fact that you are in Kansas. You're only reminded of this fact when you're away somewhere and someone asks, so where's home for you? And you start to say New York, but then you stop yourself and you say Kansas, and they look at you like you've just said the move. And for the rest of the day, you're depressed. No one dreams of moving to Kansas City. It's just a place where people end up for one reason or another. My reason was an ultimatum disguised as a proposal, or maybe it was the other way around. I can't remember. When I was 25 years old, Tom asked me to marry him. It was so romantic. He took me out to our favorite German restaurant on 86th Street and told me he was going to his residency in Kansas City. I said, I don't want to go to Kansas City. I want to stay in New York. He said, well, I'm going to Kansas City. Fine. I said, good, he said, and we ordered dessert. As we were leaving the restaurant, Tom said, listen, I think we should either get married and move to Kansas City or go our separate ways. So we got married and we moved to Kansas City. The deal was we would spend 4 years in Kansas City, 5 tops, then we would move back to New York. Tom would be a cardio attending at Mount Sinai or Columbia Presbyterian. I would get a job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Whitney or MoMA. But in the meantime, I got a job at Hallmark. I designed greeting cards for the bee holidays, Halloween, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, etc. Tom and I lived a whole life in the meantime. That's the other issue with Kansas City. When you get there, you find out it's sort of pleasant. You find out you can get a decent enough job in a place that has nice enough people. You find out that that job comes with access to a cafeteria that makes the most delicious carrot cake you can ever imagine. And that you can request that carrot cake be delivered upstairs to your office anytime you like. People say hello to you in the street. You hardly ever have to walk. You find out that you can afford a house, a big house, one with a playroom and an office and a den. In Kansas City, even the laundry gets its own room. You find out that for the price of a 1-room, 5th floor, rat-infested walk-up apartment in New York, you can get a very nice 4-bedroom home with a backyard and a garage and a tree with a swing. Life is so damn comfortable, you forget to leave. And before you know it, 30 years have gone by, and you find yourself sitting alone in your beautiful bedroom with the walk-in closet and the ensuite bathroom, fighting the urge to remind your soon-to-be ex-husband to pack suntan lotion for his divorce cruise. But I wasn't going to be left living in the meantime while Tom sailed off into the future. No way. I could have had an exciting life, but I blew it. I had a boyfriend in college who was smart and funny and could tell a story, and he liked me. The only problem was that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes he'd tell me things like he was having thoughts about electrocuting me in the bathtub or pushing me off train platforms. He assured me that he did not want to do these things, just that he was thinking about them a lot. He once made me stop drinking a glass of wine because he was afraid he might have poisoned it while I wasn't looking. I found this a little off-putting, so I broke it off. I have since found out that those thoughts are a fairly common manifestation of OCD. I know this because coincidentally, my office mate of homework suffered from the very same condition. For 20 years, whenever Angela had to take a pill, I would have to watch her take it. This way I could reassure her for the rest of the day that I knew for an absolute fact that she did not accidentally lose control and overdose on aspirin or ibuprofen or gummy vitamins. The point is, I could have married Patrick and we could have had an interesting, exciting life, and I could have been living in Manhattan and vacationing in Paris. But I married Tom, who pronounces the T in exactly and often, and who says things like anyways. I married the guy who collects old radios and has a much too cozy relationship with his elderly optometrist. I decided to break up with Patrick, the cool, handsome intellectual who only needed a healthy dose of cognitive behavior therapy, and go with the man who keeps a journal detailing his experience with different brands of contact lenses. I went with that guy.
So in reading this book, I was sort of like forcibly reminded over and over again of Diane Keaton and Something's Gotta Give. And you may tire of this comparison.
My brother just.
So that's my association, my Rorschach test.
Yep.
How would you describe the book?
Well, it's really going around as the unbeach read. So there's so many beach reads where it's the woman, she goes to the beach town, and it's just paradise, and that fixes everything for her. And then maybe she has some family squabbles or different things, but the beach town is paradise. And I live in a beach town. I'm like, where is this happening? Because in my beach town, we are locked in windowless conference room discussing permits and should the beach permit go on the front bumper or the back bumper? And how many picnic tables is too many picnic tables in the community garden? So I thought that was a funny take to say, what's really going on in these beach towns? And it's not all sipping cocktails by the pool and, lounging.
Absolutely. And so, as you just sort of said, you come from a beach town. We're in a beach town as well right now.
Yep.
How much, you have your disclaimer at the beginning, all of the fictional characters, nothing was any, in any resemblance is incidental.
That's right.
However,
Simply a coincidence.
coincidental. Just how coincidental is this book?
Yeah, it's definitely inspired by my town. A lot of the people in my town will recognize the situations that have been going on, but there's no exact characters. And, I was doing a podcast the other day with someone from the Hamptons, and he said, I don't know why you don't just say this is the house in Sagaponic, which was a house I never heard of. And so people keep saying that this is obviously this house in the Jersey Shore. It's obviously this house in Nantucket. And so I think this is happening to so many people. It's probably happening in Madison to a certain extent, where you see these big houses going up next to these little shacks. And so I think it's hitting a nerve in that way.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily, a one particular person that you base the story off of, but rather a situational thing that is happening everywhere. No, exactly. I've heard the same things.
And just these small towns, it's these little town board meetings. I mean, it's little parks and recreation. It's sort of that kind of thing of what's going on in these town meetings, and so it's that side of things.
Absolutely. You have punctuating this book at various points, the letters that Kathleen writes to kind of vent her frustrations on there.
To the supervisor.
Which for those of you playing at home, that's called a epistolary when there's letters happening in the book. Can you tell me a little bit about that choice and what you sort of wanted to capture in that?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing in these towns is what do you do when you're confronted with a problem? You usually are like, well, I can, and this is what Kathleen thinks. She thinks I can change it. I'll just write to the supervisor and tell him this is what's going on and it will be resolved. And the supervisor never answers her. So every chapter starts with a letter to the supervisor and it begins with just, oh, this is what's happening with this giant McMansion being built next to me. And then, she's alone in this place. So she starts pouring her heart out to the supervisor and telling him all of her problems. And so it's sort of a vehicle for her to slowly lose a bit of sanity.
And that kind of brings me to the character of Kathleen in general and her arc throughout the story. How did you go about developing her? What sort of went into this protagonist?
Yeah, well, I would say Kathleen is really me in 30 years. I couldn't get a job in New York and I kept threatening everybody that I was going to move to Kansas City. Yeah, because there's Hallmark is at Kansas City and I'm okay at design. And so I thought, I'm not good enough to do the A holidays, but I can probably get a job doing the B holidays. I can probably do 4th of July or something where no one sends a card. And I knew a guy that said exactly. And I thought, I will marry him and I will move to Kansas City, and then what will I think in 30 years? And that's sort of where Kathleen is. She's sort of taken the comfortable, safe choice for 30 years, and now she's doing something totally out of character, moving to this beach town and doing things. And it's, it's not paradise, but she does find happiness in the end.
So a little bit of an alternative reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, up is down. She's like, she knows this is gonna be perfect when I get to this beach town. And then it's just every bad thing happens to her. And everything she does to try and help herself makes things exponentially worse, so she joins like the nonprofit to make friends, and she gets mixed up in a money laundering scheme. She gets anxiety from all of this construction next door, so she goes to the doctor. He tells her, drink more water, drop a lemon in the glass, just keep drinking. So she's drinking glass after glass of water. And the house next door has built a septic system too close to her well. And so she's drawing drugs, this water, and now she is in the hospital in a hyperbaric chamber.
And so it is very much a comedy of errors in many ways. Are there any redeeming qualities to this beach house life that she has chosen?
Yeah, it's the community. I mean, it is those small towns where it's, we can squabble and we can disagree, but small towns, really, you have to get along. I went to school in like 3-room schoolhouse. We had 9 kids in grades K through 6. You have to get along with those 9 kids if that's your whole school. And that's a small town, you have to get along with everybody and say, well, I disagree with you on how many picnic tables is okay, but I will help you when you need help on this other thing. So it is that whole community. And that's, I think, what she really falls in love with in the end.
Which is so important. We've had a lot of striding opinions in recent years, and it's nice to have sort of a book that brings that back to like, hey, you might disagree on a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, like you are still a community. So that was sort of a nice takeaway.
Yeah. And that happens in condos, it happens everywhere. And sort of, how do we live with each other? How do we get along? And whether it's a small town or a condo or anything, it's how do we exist and talk about, and that's really these small town board meetings. That's what you get. It's everybody just saying, I will listen to you talk about this whole thing and I will hear your opinion. So yeah, there's something special about those little town board meetings.
Very much so. Okay, I have one more question that's kind of a fun one. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I have the opinion that every book has a soundtrack, whether it's one that is sort of publicly released or just sort of the thing that your deep cut as you were writing this book. Is there a soundtrack to this book? Should people be, what do we listen to while we read?
I did make a soundtrack. It's on my website, elizabethcastellano.com. But really the big song I think is probably Tom Petty, I Won't Back Down. That's her. She just, is a dog with a bone with this construction site. And really it's one of those things where she sees a lie and then she just keeps trying to figure out what is going on. She sees one lie, she finds another lie. Then, so it starts with a complaint about leaf blowers and it ends with a money laundering scheme and her being completely entrenched in this. So that's she gets to the bottom of it, this woman from Kansas. She gets to the bottom of it, and then she realizes really she is one of them, in the end. And she decides, what, let's just let it be.
Live and let die. Maybe a little McCartney on that too. Go with rock themes. So let's open it up to maybe 1 or 2 audience questions here. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask? Beautiful author. Yes, over here, the lovely lady in lavender.
First, I would like to congratulate you on this and the award. I want that for you. I don't live in a beach, but the house next door to me is still being doubled in size. And I haven't read your book, but it sounds like very much like what's happening to you. It has started a fight in a small neighborhood of 10 houses, and I can't wait to read the book. And I have to tell you, you did an excellent reading.
Yeah.
I hope if they do an audio book, you do the read. So congratulations.
Yeah, I think it is happening everywhere.
Yes.
It's happening in all of these, and also, it's a whole thing of, I live on the North Fork of Long Island. A lot of people are saying this is like the South Fork. On the North Fork, we have small lots, they're almost like city lots. And so when you build a house that takes up, 80% of that lot, that's gonna cause there's an impact on everyone. It's not just an impact on yourself. It's not just saying, well, it's my property. It's a free country, I'll do whatever I want. It does have an impact on everyone. Of course, in a beach town, there's a question of water. There's a question of how does it affect the water and the water
You
quality.
just wade a foot or two in, you're on international waters.
Yeah, if we put 10 septic systems right near the water, not gonna be great.
It's problematic.
It could be great.
And you breeze past it, but we're gonna stop again and compliment the pacing with which you read, because it really is fantastic, and it really does like call to the forefront of the comedic element of this book. It's really great, so we're not gonna breeze past. All right, over here, the gentleman.
So you're a first time writer. Who influences your writing?
I'm a big Nora Ephron fan. I like David Sedaris, I like Anna Quinlan. Who I like. Those are the big ones. You know who I love? Calvin Trillin. He wrote for the New Yorker. There's a book that no one's really read called Tepper Isn't Going Out. And it was taking about an hour or two to read. It's a tiny little book. It was done in the 90s about a man in New York City who parks his car on the street and he won't get out after he parks, and it drives everyone crazy. So he just says, I'm not getting out, just keep going. And so this drives everyone nuts and he becomes a folk hero. So I love books like that, where it's like a little idea and you can blow up. So.
Thanks. And how did you know when you found your voice?
Yeah, I really have been writing like this since high school, this sort of voice. It was really the plot that I needed. I needed to know what the story was. Always had that sort of cadence of writing, a very conversational, candid style. I think because I've always been a fan of that. Thanks.
And as a first time writer, how did the publication process kind of work for you?
Right, so I wrote, when you're a first time writer, you have to write the whole book and then you contact an agent, so you're sort of going blind. And so I wrote the whole book and I contacted an agent, and she's a big agent, and I thought she'll never answer me. And she sent me an email. I just sent her a query. I didn't send any of the book. I just said, this is what the book is about. And she just said one sentence, go ahead and send it. And so I sent it to her, and then she got back to me and she said, I have some ideas for fundamental changes.
Would you love to
And
hear?
then I had to wait about 2 weeks to hear what those fundamental changes were. And the book used to be a dual timeline. So there was a storyline that was happening in the 50s, and Kathleen had moved into this house that had happened in the 50s. And so I knew, well, she wants one half of this book, and probably she either wants from the 50s or she wants Kathleen now. And so she wanted Kathleen now. And so every other chapter had to be cut and filled in. And so that took another 6 months, and then we sold it. So sort of, that seems to be my strategy, just around the world.
And that's always one of my questions too, is like what ended up on the cutting room floor that you liked, which is an entire timeline in this case.
The whole story fell on the floor. I mean, I had an art teacher in high school, and I always think of him. I took a painting class, and I had this painting, I was working on it for weeks, and I was like, Mr. Fuller, I can't make this better. Everything I do makes it worse. It's just getting worse and worse. He said, I know what to do. And he took it and he threw it right in the garbage can. He said, stretch a new canvas. Done what, that's it. Start new. And I just kept that with me, that, what? I learned what I learned. That's over, and start new. And so I feel like it's not wasted, stretch a new canvas. I feel like that's a good motto.
What a beautiful sentiment. Any last questions? One last question.
Were you surprised that you were the Good Morning America book club pick? Did you know they were sending them your book? Or
She was the only one who was surprised, darling.
I was very surprised. I knew they were, they say a lot of things. They say, we're gonna send it here, we're gonna send it there, and we'll call Harry Styles, and we'll do all these things, and it's like, okay, sure.
Wait, is hairstyle coming? Should
Yeah.
I make it?
I know. Go on. And so I found out in January, And of course, my phone is always, nowhere near me. I'm not on social media or anything. And so everyone knew before me and my whole team. And they're like, what do you think? It's like, about what? I don't know. And then I had to keep it a secret for 6 months, for a long time. And I'm a terrible secret keeper. Very difficult for me.
But she managed.
I managed.
She managed.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Elizabeth Castellano. We are so excited for your first book to come out. We are also so excited for what's next, to get back to writing, finish your tour. We want the next one sooner than later. Let's welcome her. Thank you for joining us once again.